Where were you living at the time? And you mentioned Grand Junction.
Yes.
All right. I think you mentioned this one too. Spencer, do you want to do yours next? Can you?
Why did you do it?
Why did I join? You know, I thought about that here. And I don't know. I mean, I know a little bit was probably, you guys know how moms are, right? That they, where are you going? Make sure you're home. And, you know, be careful and all of this stuff. And I think that was part of it. I would come up here for 2 summers, came up here working ranch and doing things that way, and didn't get in trouble, you know, and kind of grew into a man. But then I'd go home and Mom would say, you got to be home by a certain time and do this and do that, and so I was feeling kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but so I did it partially to get away from home.
You wanted to be a grown up?
Yeah, yep. And, you know, I had thought about it, I had seen some shows and thought, well, you know, being in aviation, and that's why I wanted to do the helicopter mechanic and learn about and take care of aircraft and all, and that was why I went in with the guaranteed school. But I think there was just a lot of different things that went in with it. You know, I mean, I can't say that it was my mom was the only reason, or there's a lot of them, and I can't really remember them. That was almost 50 years ago.
Okay. A preceding question would be, you know, do you remember your first days in the service? And then Alex, what were you going to ask? Nice and loud.
What did it feel like?
Pardon?
What did it feel like?
First days in the service, I got down into Missouri for boot camp, and it was kind of scary in a way because it's new. It's the military is a lifestyle that you haven't experienced before. And I mean, you get on a bus and then you get on a plane and you go somewhere with the clothes on your back. And when you get there and they issue your uniform, the clothes you wore, you put in a box and they mail it home. Because during boot camp, the only clothes you're allowed to have is your military uniforms. You're not allowed any civilian clothes. And just the whole mystique of it and everything, it was kind of a scary thing. And then when I finished my schooling for helicopter mechanic, and every day, and it took about a week or so, but every day you go check the bulletin board. And it's like your teacher's got a bulletin board over here on the board, and it says what you're going to be doing today. Well, that's where we found out everything that was going on. And you go check the bulletin board. And finally there'd be a list up that had your class and where everybody in your class was going. There was 10 soldiers in my class. 8 of us had RVN behind our name, which stood for Republic of Vietnam. The other two had GER, which was Germany. A year later, we were in Long Bend at what was called Camp Alpha, coming home. All 8 of us were in Camp Alpha together, coming home. The 2 guys that went to Germany, they were in Camp Alpha coming in to Vietnam. They just got delayed a year. But, and that was a real scary thing when you see behind your name where you're going and you're going to war. But you know, I mean, it was kind of scary and kind of exciting at the same time. You were moving on and doing something new and something different. We knew more or less, I mean, you know, we would be door gunners or crew chiefs on helicopters, or we might be mechanics, because our schooling taught us both. But we knew we weren't going to be what we nicknamed grunts or infantrymen out in the jungle packing guns and out there face to face with the enemy, like we're sitting here. We knew we weren't going to be doing that, so that was a good thing.
That was relieving.
Okay, Max? He's already touched on this, but you want to ask again?
What was your job?
I was a helicopter mechanic in Vietnam, and then back when I came back to the States and was in Texas, I was in what was called air defense artillery. We learned how to shoot aircraft down, enemy aircraft.
Thank you. Micah?
Did you see combat?
Not really. I saw the effects of combat because part of my job, my main job in Vietnam was to fix the helicopters. And there was days that, I mean, a lot of times they didn't actually fly the soldiers right into combat or pick them up out of combat. They would take them out into the field and drop them off, and then they'd go fly, do their thing. But there were days that they would go in on a known combat missions, and they would come back shot up and tore up, and we had to fix them. And while I was there, we lost 2 helicopters that were shot down out in the field by enemy fire. They were later recovered and brought back and had to be repaired so they could go back to flying. But as far as actually being in combat, no. While I was in the unit, we had 2 men that were killed as a result of combat. And when I don't know if you guys have heard about the moving Vietnam Wall. It's a replica of the actual Vietnam Wall. It has been in Craig, and I went and looked up those 2 guys' names on that wall. One of these days I do want to get back to Washington, D.C. and see the real thing.
All right, Gabe? Yeah. Were there any casualties?
Oh, yeah.
You kind of
Were there any casualties in your unit?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. Was we had the day that I actually got into the unit, we had a chopper that was shot down, and they lost a if I remember right, it was door gunner. And then later on, we had a pilot that was shot and killed, and the crew chief was wounded. That chopper made it back. But those were the only casualties that we had while I was in the unit.
Marcos? Did you get your question? Okay, Marcos wanted to ask you if you would tell about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Oh. Actually, one of them was actually stateside when I was in Fort Hood, Texas. And we had to, we would go out into the field for 2 weeks and do annual maneuvers and play war games. And there was 2 big divisions on our post. One was the 2nd Armored Division, the other one was 1st Cav. And we would go out and have war games and just kind of keep in practice and learn what we were supposed to be doing. And we, at the end of this, we were going to have a parade for the post commander and some of the other high officials. And we were, because I was platoon headquarters section from my platoon, we went for practice session. And we were going back to the unit. It was a real cloudy, foggy day, hardly any visibility, and why helicopters were up is beyond me. But the clouds kind of lifted and you could see maybe a block. And all of a sudden, here comes 2 helicopters and they fly into each other. I saw them hit and fall to the ground. And where everybody came from, I have no idea, but people came out of the woods. And there were, between the 2 helicopters, there was a Huey, which had a crew of 4, and they had, if I remember right, it was either 6 or 8 soldiers on it. And then the other helicopter was what we call a Kiowa, which was a Bell Jet Ranger, and you see those flying around here from time to time, the small one. It only had 2 guys on it. So out of 12 to 14 men on those 2 helicopters, only 2 survived. And I went over there and I helped pull all of those guys out. And that one actually was a memorable day or experience. I mean, it wasn't a pleasant one. And it was actually worse than any of my memories in Vietnam. But I think that's one that started me on some of the other things that I did the rest of my life. I spent, here in Craig, I spent 6 years as an EMT on the ambulance, 16 years on the fire department, and 32 years mine rescue. And I think that day kind of started some of that.